The quickest way to find yourself into scrutiny by an insurance company or scrutiny by a board investigator is when patients are unhappy and make complaints. And typically they're going to make complaints for one of two reasons. There was some adverse outcome of a procedure. That's more commonplace, but they feel they're getting ripped off, or they're paying too much, or they feel like somehow they were deceived in paying what they paid for a procedure. That is a quick way to be on defense with, again, an insurance company, a board investigator, potentially a enforcement regulator, or all three. Right. And that's certainly not where anybody wants to find themselves.
Yeah, and that's, I know, just talking to dental consultant reviewers who look at all this stuff and investigators, it's not like they know who these people are. They're already watching them. So by the time you get a call, like, honestly, they've got you to the wall. You're just settling at that point, right? Or if it's really egregious, like you said, it could be criminal. Because is it the state board that could refer to the attorney general of the state, or is it the state board that does the investigation? I'm really confused on that, actually.
You could get a referral from anyone. So it could be a referral for criminal investigation by just an individual patient. You could get a referral from an insurance company that we see with more frequency. And I think that's another big misconception of audits is that, the audit, let's just give them the records and then we'll pay back whatever they're asking for. It's not worth our time or energy to try to fight this. They're going to get money anyway. Let's just pay it. Well, audits are an investigative tool. And so it is not uncommon for audits to be used as an access to information. And that information and those findings to then be referred by insurance company to a, not necessarily state board, but to a state attorney general's office, Medicaid fraud control unit, if it's a Medicaid practice, God forbid, FBI or other three-letter agency on the federal side for investigation, depending on, the concerns. And then, as we're seeing in insurance audits, they look at compliance with billing and coding, but they're also looking at times, whether the work performed meets the standard of care. And in those circumstances, when they feel like it doesn't, that's when you can find yourself with a referral to the board to take action for substandard work.
This is like having your house wide open and saying, come take what you want, pretty much. Like, just look around, and if you find something bad, just, put some handcuffs on me or something. I would want to quit. I would want to retire. But then you can't even get away, right? Because you've got to go through the whole thing. I talked to one former investigator from Maryland, and he came to one of my classes, old guy. He's like, I don't even need CE. I just like insurance classes because I want to hear what's going on. Really funny guy. And he said, I remember one office, and he mentioned the name and it sounded familiar. And he goes, yeah, we had a whole case and everything. Attorney General met us there. He knew we were coming, and we walked in. Nobody was in the office except for him sitting there, and he had his license in his hand, and he said, here's my license. I know, I'm done. And he just handed his license over. And I said, well, what happened? He said, oh, we still went after him. Like, just giving up the license isn't, like, that's just drama. Like, that doesn't mean anything. So, but I think he thought if he just retired, he said he thinks the doctor just thought if I retire and get my license up, like, it'll go away. It didn't go away. But that's a hell of a story, right? So
there is such an underappreciation from my standpoint of the consequences that an audit can bring to a provider. And which is why I think more providers need to recognize that they should not be going this alone. Too often I'm contacted by a provider after they've submitted all their records and they're now receiving this initial findings letter that's asking for 6+ figures back for, services that from the insurance perspective were not in compliance with their regulations. And it's not that we can't effectuate change at that stage, but you're asking us to fight with one arm tied behind our back. Where it would be far more beneficial for us in doing our job and you for the ultimate outcome of an audit to bring us in right at the initial stage when you get that request for records. Because in my opinion, and I know I've spoken about this a lot, that's where practices make some of the bigger mistakes. They don't produce all the necessary documentation to support the service that's under scrutiny. They don't provide it in an organized manner. They don't keep a copy of what's produced so that you know exactly what is being scrutinized by the insurance auditors or reviewers. They don't provide it in the manner that it's been requested They don't provide it timely, and in some instances, they don't provide it at all, thinking that somehow this is an optional process when it's absolutely not.
Wow.
And then again, as I like to say, we're constantly trying to influence the decision makers before they've made their decisions, because there is subjectivity in all of this. Whether the documentation rises to the level to justify a particular procedure, they're going to be calling balls and strikes. And if we've done the easy things right, we're more inclined to get the reviewers to go our way when they're making the hard decisions. And it can sound simplistic because it really is. I mean, when we get brought into a case where we're producing the records, every patient has their own individualized folder. We've got the ledger in one, we've got x-rays clearly identified by the date in another folder. We've got intraoral photos if they exist. We've got the treatment notes. We've got consents, medical history. We've got it all very organized and put together and packaged in a way where it signifies organization. It signifies to the auditor that this practice has their stuff together. And, we cannot be as worried about this one. Now, if the documentation's a complete disaster, then that's another story. But, if we're doing the little things right, again, it's easier to get the insurance company to go our way when they're making the harder decisions.
Would you like to hear more? Follow the link for the full episode.